Hello, I'm Geiger. I'd like to introduce the Vertical Solution ProSharp 4X system to you. And the Vertical Solution ProSharp is a bowl gouge and spindle gouge sharpening system. This system is designed as an aftermarket product to the popular Wolverine system, and it is attachable using 4 screws. It takes just a minute to attach it, and this system provides you with a high degree of repeatability of 4 different angles for the tip angles of your tools. That enables you to produce an Ellsworth Irish type grind, a micro bevel grind at a steeper angle, a 50-degree grind if you wish, and also a 40-degree grind primarily used for spindle gouges. The repeatability of those positions is very good, because what we're doing is pulling a pin out here and repositioning this arm to different positions that supports the end of the jig, which I'll demonstrate in a few minutes. This arm right here is used to move up against the face of a grinding wheel, whether it's a CBN wheel or an aggregate type wheel. It's very important to have a repeatable distance, and then that is removable, and once you remove that, then you can do a calibration of the system and match it to your particular grinder. By having this vertical adjustment here, we can adjust it and make it work well with any size grinder. Then there's a protrusion gauge here, which is used to set the distance that your gouge protrudes from the face of your jig, and that gives you repeatability irregardless of the length of your particular gouge. And so it's compensating as the gouges get shorter over time. This system is attachable to the Wolverine, which I'll demonstrate to you in a few minutes. Your Vertical Solution ProSharp system will be shipped to you using a U.S. Postal Priority Mail box, which is a medium flat rate at $11.30 to all domestic locations in the United States. If it's being shipped internationally, it will arrive in a box like this. The domestic shipments, when you receive it, take it out of the box, you will have a system that looks like this, which has your V-notch, your 4-position adjustable rod, the screw and knob here that supports the horizontal gauge, and a pin that's on a stainless steel chain that you can pull out and reposition these to 4 different locations. This is the protrusion gauge, which is integral to this particular part, and there's a couple of machined ears here that are used to slip over the Wolverine, and 4 Allen screws which are used to attach it to that. Be sure not to over tighten the screws. I have a little note here on a string that indicates that. These don't need to be tightened very securely in order to make it hold. In addition to those 2 parts, you'll get a little baggie with a 60-degree gauge, which is used to set the height of the system and calibrate it to your grinder. And there's a Allen wrench that do the attachment as well as to set the vertical height. I'll demonstrate this in a minute. If you've ordered the system for the Wolverine Vari-Grind, then you will also receive this particular little gauge that is used to preset the Wolverine to a particular angle before you get started. So if you just put that system against here, slide it up against that wall, tighten this, then that is in the precise location that you need before you calibrate the Vertical Solution system. When using the ProSharp 4X system, you can use an Ellsworth jig that has a fixed stem position. If you're going to use a Vari-Grind jig, then that Vari-Grind jig arm needs to be set in a specific location. To do that, using our gauge, you slide the arm up until it touches and then lock it in. And it makes it very repeatable, and you'll get an equivalent result to what you'll get with an Ellsworth jig with our system. To install the Vertical Solution VSPS4X, you will need a Wolverine system that's got a V-notch, and the V-notch currently is facing upward, and a receiver here that accepts this 3/4 inch tube, and that has a cam lock on here to lock it into place. So keep it unlocked momentarily, pull this out, rotate it so that the V-notch is now facing downward toward the floor, and maybe set it back in here. You don't have to tighten it very much. The Vertical Solution ProSharp system, as I showed it earlier, as you'll see, is pre-assembled to this point. You will need to then put the horizontal positioning gauge into place, tighten this knob here, and then drop it down and rest it right down on the back plate of the Wolverine V-notch. Once it's in place there, I may get in the way for the camera with my head here, but I need to tighten up these 4 1/4 inch set screws. You'll notice that I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the set screws. And then once that's secured to there, then slide this up against the face of your wheel. What this does is it fixes the position from this point to the face of the wheel, and as the wheel changes in diameter, then it compensates for that as well. You would want to use this gauge anytime that you move this position. Maybe you pulled it out for some reason, or you flipped the system over to utilize the Wolverine V-notch, or maybe you've dressed your wheels. But you always want to go back to this same setting, so just use this gauge, slide against the wheel, lock it in, and then remove it. I always leave it in a handy location right here in the front of my grinder, because I use it every time that I move something here. If you're using a CBN wheel, even though your CBN wheel's not changing in diameter, you still need to have this position set before you start using it. Now that that's set, we're going to use the Vari-Grind system in this installation video. And the Vari-Grind has that variable arm, and earlier I demonstrated how to set that arm using our preset gauge, so we have a predictable angle here. This is the 60-degree gauge, which has a 8-inch diameter hollow grind on it, on the tip. It's at 60 degrees. That now needs to be inserted into the protrusion gauge, bottom it out in there, lock this down, and that's mimicking what you're going to do with the gouge later. Bring the stem down, put it in the V-notch against the end of this 4-position rod, and then lean this 60-degree gauge now against the wheel. Observe, without the wheel turning, observe to see if that is matching perfectly against the wheel. If it's not, then reposition the vertical height here a little bit at a time, using a set screw here to loosen, this set screw, and then raise or lower that position until it matches perfectly. When it matches perfectly, lock this in securely, because you won't change that again in the future. Take this out, and now you could then put your gouge in its place, set the same protrusion distance again, and then begin to sharpen. An interesting thing is, notice that the V-notch for the Wolverine has not been interfered with by this installation. You can still use that V-notch if you need to for other tools, and just rotate it 180 degrees, and now their V-notch is facing upward. If you want to go back to the Vertical Solution ProSharp, rotate it back over, put this in, take the horizontal positioning gauge, go against the wheel, and you're ready to roll.